So next we have Ryan Spencer, who is the Director of Municipal Consulting at Rainbow Treecare. He is an ISA certified arborist and Rainbow Treecare's municipal consulting arborist. His primary role is to help municipalities and government organizations care for and protect their trees, largely through managing the largest number of municipal emerald ash borer treatment programs in the nation. These programs utilize a public-private partnership to increase homeowner education around emerald ash borer and promote proactive ash management to slow the spread of the pest and reduce public and private tree management costs. Today, Rainbow Treecare has more than 60,000 ash trees under protection, the majority of which are within a partnering city. Ryan received a BS in Environmental Sciences, Policy, and Management from the University of Minnesota. Thank you, Ryan, for being here today. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I'll let you go ahead and take over the screen.
Thanks for having me, Eric. So I will share my screen here, and we'll get started. Can you see everything well? Perfect.
Looks great.
All right, awesome. So like Eric said, my name's Ryan Spencer. I'm actually the municipal consulting arborist here at Rainbow Treecare. But everything else Eric said lines up well. My job here is to work with municipalities in the Twin Cities metro area of Minnesota to care for and protect their trees. With the current level of infestation of emerald ash borer in the Twin Cities, the vast majority of my work is done with partnering with cities to do treatment for the municipalities themselves, and then offer discounted kind of bulk treatment rates for residential homeowners in those cities. We'll get into that a little bit later. Some of the key takeaways from this presentation, we're going to talk about the mechanics of slow ash mortality, or the SLAM model, the scalability of the SLAM model, cooperative EAB management, how cities can incentivize private tree treatment, and how municipalities should prioritize their management actions. So we'll start with a few predictions about the future of EAB management. The first is tree protection will play a larger role in management plan strategies. I see that with my own eyes here in the Twin Cities metro. Most new municipalities that are getting involved in EAB management in response to an infestation are turning to treatment in some way, shape, or form. I would expect that to continue not only with municipalities, but with private tree owners, as tree protection is an economical way to preserve the tree and spread the potential cost of removal out over the long term. Treatments will be seen as equal parts tree protection and pest suppression. That's something we're going to talk about quite a bit in this presentation, and was really kind of the revolutionary idea at the forefront of the SLAM model, is the idea that not only treatment would preserve that individual ash tree, but also interrupt the life cycle of EAB and really reduce that exponential spread that the pest traditionally has, to the point where you can lower pest pressure in a given area and really extend the length of time of that infestation, which benefits all tree owners. Municipalities will use EAB infestations to increase public and private tree inventory data. Again, we're living in really a data-driven world, and that goes for all industries. So tree management is not the exception. But most cities know where every stop sign is, every utility line, and when they need to be maintained. So really expanding that use of data over to trees is something that I see becoming more popular in the future. Stakeholders will use EAB to engage more people in conversations about the benefits of trees. I think we're really well past the point where Dutch elm disease swept through a lot of American cities, and I think homeowners now really didn't live through that, and so they don't understand what kind of large-scale urban forest devastation looks like until now. So this is really a great opportunity for people to realize that trees make our cities more livable. They make our properties more valuable. They have a ton of environmental benefits, and this is really kind of a wake-up call for people to realize you don't really know what you have until it's gone. Trees will achieve infrastructure status. So again, we're going to talk about a little bit about how traditional kind of infrastructure is maintained and how that can be applied towards ash tree populations in the face of EAB infestation. And finally, longer regional death curves will provide more time for an orderly transition away from ash trees. So as more regions, more cities use treatments or other methods to try and manage or slow the spread of emerald ash borer, those longer death curves are going to provide more time for all tree owners to make informed decisions and really transition away from ash trees. So really, early EAB management was primarily, reactive, removing infested trees as fast as you could. And quickly cities became overwhelmed, private tree companies became overwhelmed with just the volume of dead trees and hazardous trees that needed to be removed. So really from a manager's perspective, what was needed was kind of a science-based or model-based solution for different options to try and get ahead of this problem as EAB spreads throughout the country. And the first really kind of landmark paper that is at the heart of EAB management is the SLAM model, or slowing ash mortality. And this paper was really revolutionary when it came out because it talked about different methods, proactive removals, surveillance methods, and chemical treatments that could be used at outlier sites or areas with recent EAB infestations to try and reduce pest pressure, reduce the rate at which EAB replicates or reproduces, and in turn, provide more time or preserve more trees. And it was really one of the first papers that suggested that treatments could be used as both tree preservation and pest suppression, like I talked a couple slides ago. So it really suggested that treating even 10 or 20% of an ash population every year, randomly distributed throughout the population, could provide benefits for most or all of the ash trees in that population. And the second paper that's really kind of at the bedrock of this EAB management idea is this resource and energy economics article. The title is kind of a mouthful: a bioeconomic analysis of emerald ash borer invasion in urban forest with multiple jurisdictions. And essentially what this paper aimed to look at was how can cooperation and cooperative management increase benefits in a given region that's experiencing an emerald ash borer infestation. So it looked at multiple budget scenarios, really kind of a base case where cities or region took no kind of preventive action for emerald ash borer, a second scenario in which cities were constrained by their own budgets, and a third in which cities cooperated in a region and would share funds, and there was kind of a centralized funding approach to more aggressively manage the threat posed by emerald ash borer. And what this paper found was, cooperative management yielded much higher benefits for every city. The idea that cities could provide funds to a neighboring city to more aggressively combat their emerald ash borer infestation would have benefits to them in lower pest pressure in the area and potentially extending the length of time until their city became infested so they could take preventive actions. So these two papers really formed a science-based solution and an argument for treatments and for municipalities and regions to get involved in taking proactive steps to manage their trees in the face of emerald ash borer infestation. Now, this figure is straight from the SLAM model. They modeled treatment scenarios in a given population of ash trees. So you can see the x-axis is years after introduction or years after introduction of emerald ash borer, and your y-axis is amount of healthy ash trees in that population. And it may be a little bit hard to see, but I can walk through the different scenarios that they modeled out. This thick line here is no treatment. So you can see that around year 3 and 4, you start to see tree deaths in this population. And that's because emerald ash borer can infest a tree for multiple years before symptoms become visible, and then ultimately the tree dies. But the rate at which tree death occurs in that population accelerates rapidly. For anybody that's seen the EAB mortality curve, this line here is really just the inverse of that mortality curve. Now, the slightly curved line here is a 10% yearly treatment. So randomly picking 10% of the ash trees in this population and doing a chemical treatment, you ended at year 10 with roughly 75% of the population still alive, which again speaks to this idea of putting as many treated trees in the population as possible to increase the likelihood that emerald ash borer adults are going to feed on treated trees and are going to lay their eggs on treated trees. And finally, this dashed line is a 20% treatment level. So treating a randomized 20% of that ash population every year yielded almost 100% EAB survivability in this SLAM model, and really kind of paved the way for this idea that treating, you don't need to treat every single tree every single year or every 2 years to have a tremendous impact on the population. So again, this is really kind of at the bedrock of modern EAB management and utilizing treatments. So research has demonstrated time and time again that tree protection is better than removal and replacement. In many situations, you can treat an ash tree for 20 years or more before the cost of removing and replacing that tree equals the cost of treatment. Now, in addition to spreading that upfront cost over the long term, 20 years or more, you're also getting 20 additional years of tree benefit from that treated tree. Now, we know that trees are very important to urban ecosystems and to municipalities, but we also know that mature trees are far more valuable than new plantings. So really, utilizing treatment on any scale is an effective way to preserve tree benefits over the long term. And the strategies and benefits of SLAM work on any scale. It is a scalable model. All the way down on a neighborhood scale. So this is a neighborhood association that we work with, and all the green dots in this thumbnail are treated ash trees. So in this kind of small scale neighborhood scale, you're not having a tremendous amount of pest pressure just due to the fact that all of these trees are treated. Those benefits multiply in an order of magnitude when you reach the city scale. So across the city, you are increasing the likelihood that emerald ash borer is feeding on or laying its eggs on a treated tree. It has tremendous benefits throughout the city. Same can be said in a regional setting. Again, once you hit a regional setting, you're seeing benefits across those sort of formed political lines of cities and counties. Emerald ash borer flies between those at will. And these are all treated trees in the Twin Cities metro area. And really the important thing is, this is all data that we wouldn't have at Rainbow Treecare if it wasn't for emerald ash borer. So again, the idea that expanding the use of treatment data to understand where we have ash trees, where treatments are taking place is something we didn't do until emerald ash borer came around. And you can make the argument that SLAM on a state level makes sense. Currently in the state of Minnesota, the emerald ash borer infestation is largely contained to the metro area and some areas outstate. But the more treated trees that emerald ash borer runs into, it's going to slow the spread into outstate Minnesota and give tree owners in different areas of the state more time to take proactive measures and figure out a management plan for themselves for when they do become infested. Now, as I said before, all tree owners benefit from SLAM. This slide has a municipal golf course next to a neighborhood, and you can see all the purple dots are public protected ash trees. So ash trees protected by the city. You can see they're in the city's right of way as well as on this municipal owned golf course. The green dots are private protected ash trees protected by citizens on private property. Now, the city and these property owners have completely different budgets, completely different management goals, but they're helping each other out. These treated trees are not producing adult emerald ash borer that are flying between one another. You don't have adults flying from privately protected trees to publicly protected trees and vice versa. And all tree owners truly benefit from SLAM in that property owners in this neighborhood or city trees that aren't treated for emerald ash borer are experiencing lower pest pressure. So their time to mortality is lengthened by the reduced pest pressure in the area due to the treatments from both private and public tree owners. So truly all tree owners benefit from SLAM. Now there are some limitations to this SLAM model. There's an unknown infestation date. In the model below that I ran through, looking at treatment scenarios, it's assumed that you know exactly when your infestation starts. If that were true in reality, managing emerald ash borer would be much easier. In reality, it takes a great amount of resources to do the surveillance that's necessary to know exactly when trees are infested. Again, the idea that or the fact that trees can be infested for multiple years before they show signs of emerald ash borer infestation and then ultimately succumb to emerald ash borer makes understanding that infestation date very difficult in the real world. It's also impractical to transfer funds between tree owners. We know that all tree owners benefit from slowed ash mortality from an increase in treatments in a given area, but really the property owner or the tree owner is on the hook financially for doing these preventive actions, doing treatments and things like that. So it really becomes a question of who pays when the whole public benefits from the SLAM model. There's also jurisdictional limitations to the kind of ideal tree volumes that are necessary that vet out this model. So again, the figure at the bottom of the screen, it assumes that your EAB manager has access to 100% of the tree population. When we're talking about treating 10 or 20% of the trees randomly, we're talking 10 or 20% of the ash population in a given area. So cities can treat every single one of their ash trees that they own, but still they only own a fraction of the total ash trees in their given area. And that really kind of throws a wrench into this SLAM model and makes incentivizing or getting private tree owners to take action much more important, because the city can only go so far in its jurisdiction to deal with emerald ash borer. It really needs cooperation between public and private tree owners. And finally, as I mentioned before, trees have not obtained the privileges associated with infrastructure status. Simply put, they're managed a different way. Sometimes under the best case scenario, they're thought of something that you plant in the ground, walk away, and hope to come back 40 years later and see a nice mature tree. And in other contexts, the worst case in municipal tree management, they're seen as kind of something to combat, sort of the enemy of the city tree manager, something to contend with, to try and contain. And so they're not really looked at the same and not maintained the same as traditional infrastructure. And we'll look at that on the next slide here. So on the left is the pavement condition index. So this is really a widely accepted pavement management strategy. You can see the red line is kind of your base case, no maintenance scenario. It's kind of hard. I understand the type is a little bit small, but what this shows is over the first 75% of the pavement's life, there's about a 40% drop in quality. And then another 40% drop in quality over the next about 10 or 12% of its life. So there's really an accelerating depreciation in quality of this pavement. But the black line represents periodic maintenance or resurfacing of this pavement. So the idea that small inputs of repaving can extend the life of this pavement, extend its usefulness over the long term. Now you put that side by side with the figure from the SLAM model, there's a lot of similarities. The kind of base case or no treatment case shows that accelerated depreciation, that accelerated tree death. And the pavement condition index improvement lines pretty closely mirror what a 10% treatment scenario would look at. So there's a lot of similarities between these two. One is a widely accepted kind of infrastructure pavement management strategy, and the other is not necessarily a widely accepted tree management strategy, despite the fact that they do share a lot of similarities. Again, I understand the text is small, but here on the pavement condition index, it talks a bit about ride quality and cost to repair. So I think the important thing to keep in mind is we're not just maintaining pavement just to do it. There's a public good aspect that's associated with it. They're looking at ride quality for citizens. They're looking at potentially, people damaging their vehicles. So they're taking the public good into account, with pavement management, and not necessarily when it comes to tree management, which is also important and has a tremendous public benefit. So we had these, kind of landmark scientific papers and models that guided and vetted out that, treatment and proactive management of emerald ash borer was possible. But really the next question became, how to put it in a way to engage stakeholders. And that's really where the model emerald ash borer management plan was created by Rainbow Treecare's Jeff Hafner and Michael Orange. Jeff's a longtime arborist here at Rainbow, and Michael Orange was a retired city planner. So this kind of unlikely duo combined to really get in front of stakeholders and provide them with material that described the problem posed by emerald ash borer, some of the benefits of managing it consistent with the SLAM model, and really ways that they can implement kind of goals and make things achievable in their communities. So they did a lot of kind of lobbying efforts at the state and local city levels to try and enact some cooperative EAB management ideas into reality. And when we're dealing with cooperative EAB management, the scale is important. And really the question becomes, what's ideal? So multi-state would have tremendous benefits, but it's probably too large. States have their own independent governments and they have very different priorities and goals. It would be very hard for some states to really care about an infestation that could be hundreds or thousands of miles away and really put funds towards that to try and see the benefits for their residents. The state level makes a lot of sense. There's logical borders, kind of a familiar jurisdictional structure, one governor, one state legislature. The issue with really the state level tends to be state government is maybe not as quick acting and as nimble to get in front of something that is as dynamic as emerald ash borer, as fast spreading. And also the question becomes almost the same as a multi-state. The infestation is not balanced equally throughout a state. There's portions in the state that are heavily infested, like here in Minnesota, and portions that are not. So getting one state government to try and tackle this problem that can be unevenly distributed can be difficult. On a regional level, there are cooperative environmental agreements that already exist. There are, utilities and water features and sewers that run between cities that are managed cooperatively. There are watershed districts on a regional level. But part of the difficulty with regional management is cities don't want to see those funds disappear, and go into another area. It's hard for them to see the benefits. So there's oftentimes a hesitancy for kind of buy-in on that regional level. City, however, we found is really the sweet spot for this cooperative management. With the city, the money stays within the community. So the money invested provides benefits for the community itself. The infestation timeline is generally similar. The community becomes infested at roughly the same rate or roughly the same time period. You don't see a huge multi-year lag typically. It's easier to implement with the kind of city council or local city government. There's less gatekeepers, not to say that there's zero gatekeepers in the way of implementation, but it tends to be a little bit easier. And the city can do a great job of really incentivizing homeowner participation. They're pretty good at that in our experience. We do see that Cities with low levels of rentership, high levels of home ownership tend to have the most success because really when it comes to EAB management, we want the person living in the home to be the homeowner and be the stakeholder. That typically provides the most success. And then all the way down to a neighborhood level. Neighborhood organizations are great. They can mobilize extremely quickly. Sometimes the funding can be a little less quick to be developed, but it comes around. And really the most important thing about neighborhoods is there's a strong focus on the neighborhood tree canopy. The people in these neighborhood groups, they really care about the trees and the way that their neighborhood looks. So typically they're very quick to get involved and they operate well, with this cooperative management. But no matter the scale of EAB management, maximum success requires simultaneous efforts at all levels. Neighborhood groups inside of cities that are taking action, inside of regions that are taking action, inside of a state that is aware of the problem. The more action taken at every level increases the success of cooperative management. So for cities that are looking at implementing their EAB management plans, typically their first plan of action is to develop a request for proposal. So they take their EAB management plan elements, which are really just a scalable version of SLAM. They're looking at maximizing treatments in their cities between public and private property to slow the spread of EAB in their community and really buy themselves more time to manage the threat posed by emerald ash borer. These management plan elements incentivize private tree owner participation, but don't require it. One of the most popular ways that cities can incentivize private tree ownership is looking to use their purchasing power to try and secure a lower price for their residents for treatments. The EAB management plan includes goals of accurate budget and tree tracking mechanisms. So that's going to help the plan get adopted. And it tracks participation over time. By tracking participation, you can really track pretty accurately tree benefits. We know the stormwater benefits, the carbon sequestration that ash trees provide. So you can very easily quantify what are the environmental benefits of taking these actions of treating these trees throughout the city. So really, they take these plan elements and develop what's called an RFP, or request for proposal. So they're putting out a request to private vendors to treat publicly owned trees, provide a discounted treatment rate for private residents in the city, and they can add different qualifications in the request for proposal that really suit their needs from an EAB management plan perspective. So for example, they can require contractors to participate in education and outreach. So not only are you serving the citizens of the municipality, but there's some requirement of trying to get the word out that EAB is an issue. It's possible to treat your trees, maybe advertising that there is a discounted rate for treatment in the city. These RFPs can also include requirements for GIS infrastructure and ash tree tracking. So knowing which trees are being treated where, how large are these trees, when were they last treated, are they being continued to be treated? Again, that really speaks to kind of the tracking participation over time and really tracking success. The big thing is with these programs, cities want to be able to brag that their program is a success, that they're treating trees, that they're making a difference and benefiting all tree owners through this increase in treatment and increase in awareness of emerald ash borer. So when these cities have successful programs, oftentimes other cities want to replicate these programs. City employees want to provide the best possible experience for their residents, however they can. And so when you see these RFPs shared between cities and these programs implemented in different cities down the line, you kind of do achieve this pseudo-cooperative management approach. This next slide kind of illustrates that. You start at the top. Again, the city develops an EAB management plan and goals, develops an RFP and implements a successful city program. it shares that RFP to the neighboring city, and so on and so forth, until you see this pseudo cooperative management. Really, another way to think about this is the more cities that are implementing these programs that are kind of doing their own scaled down version of SLAM next to one another, you really go from that city scale to that regional scale of management, despite the funds not being transferred between cities. Really, all the funding, all the benefits kind of stay within that city. By doing them next to each other, you sort of have that pseudo regional management. So really, the foundational premises for combined municipal homeowner programs starts with, the biggest threat that's posed by EAB is the rate at which it kills unprotected ash trees. So, forests in general, urban forests are always in a state of change. There's always trees that are dying. There's always trees that are being planted. Storms roll through. But when something like EAB comes through and just destroys otherwise healthy trees at the rate that it does, if no action is taken, it quickly overwhelms municipalities, quickly overwhelms homeowners and private tree companies to try and deal with just the sheer amount of dead trees and hazardous trees that happen in a short amount of time. So knowing that, and knowing that treatments double as tree preservation and pest suppression, increasing the number of treated trees in each population slows the rate at which ash trees die. And that allows all tree owners more time to treat or remove their trees. Now, that includes people that haven't treated and elect to treat, and that includes people that don't elect to treat and need to get their tree removed. The pest population is lowered, trees die at a slower rate, and it really, just kind of lowers the stress level in that area. And then by reducing peak annual tree deaths, tree removal costs are reduced and tree benefits are increased. The more trees that are treated, the more tree benefits there are, the lower the peak annual deaths are, the cost to remove these trees is lower. When everybody's maxed out and not available to treat the tree because they're so busy, the price for removal only goes up, and that only hurts private tree owners and municipalities trying to deal with the damage caused by EAB. So we really know that SLAM works. SLAM is scalable, and cities, are really the sweet spot in our experience for implementing these kinds of partnerships, these public-private partnerships to treat ash trees. But the question becomes, how do you start? Cities really needed a model for prioritizing their actions. Simply put, cities already have very strained budgets. And something like EAB coming around really puts them in a tough spot where they need to choose. Are we, removing dead and hazardous trees? Are we removing highly infested trees? Where do we start? How much resources do we put into surveillance? And so this paper, this multi-stage stochastic programming approach to the optimal surveillance and control of emerald ash borer in cities, which again is a paper with another mouthful, but we'll explain exactly what that means in a second, really aimed to kind of answer the question, once you have an EAB infestation, what steps should you take in what order is going to give you the most bang for your buck, so to speak. So this was the first paper of its kind, the first kind of modeling of its kind, and we'll get into that in a second here. Before we talk about the paper at any length, if you're anything like me, the word stochastic is not in your daily vocabulary. Essentially, it's a random probability distribution or pattern. In this case, it's used in modeling of tree death. It may be analyzed statistically, but it can't be predicted precisely. So again, it's working off of randomized variables. In this case, it's looking at trees in time and space and declining in quality. So this model is based off of 7 years of EAB infestation observations in Northern Ohio, I believe around the Toledo area. And then that data was applied to a possible infestation in the city of Burnsville, Minnesota. So Burnsville is a southern suburb of the Twin Cities metro area here. They picked Burnsville because at the time they were doing this modeling, EAB was a recent find in the area. So they wanted to look into providing some insights into optimal surveillance and control strategies. So this paper provided a lot of valuable insight for surveillance and control of EAB. So one of the key takeaways is the detectability of an infestation and the efficacy of treatment really depend on the level of host infestation. Now this is important because as I've said a couple times, EAB can infest a tree for 1 or more years before damage is visible. It's also important because chemical treatment is effective only for trees with low to moderate levels of infestation. So typically a tree is treatable up until about that 30% canopy dieback level, give or take. So delaying surveillance, could potentially mean seeing some of the trees that would have otherwise been treatable the year previous slip into that, 50% or more canopy decline where treatment's really no longer an option. So in almost all infestation and budget scenarios, it was never optimal to delay surveillance. So when you have a possible infestation, it's critical to apply surveillance immediately. A good kind of thought process on this that the Minnesota Department of Agriculture uses is that when you have a confirmed EAB infestation, you can do 365 or 360 degrees around the tree, and any ash tree within 2 miles is possibly infested. So really surveillance for not only that kind of first confirmed infestation, but also working your way out to try and identify additional infestations that may be in that area is critically important. And then surveillance treatment or removal should mainly focus on the spatial locations where the infestation started. So again, the idea that 2 miles in any direction could be your kind of starting point for taking those actions. Now this is straight from the paper on this model, and it's a little bit busy, and I'll try and explain it as best I can, but I think it's really important and it drives home the point of this paper. Trees in the S category are susceptible, so they're not showing any signs of EAB infestation, but obviously they could be, or they could be currently infested. Your level 1s are low infestation, they're still treatable. Level 2 are that medium infestation, so they're showing signs of EAB infestation, but below that kind of 30% canopy dieback threshold. Level 3 are highly infested trees, they're untreatable. Level 4 trees are dead. This model shows in year 1, when there's no surveillance done, all of your categories, they drop 1 level. So your susceptible trees suddenly become low infestations, your low infestations become medium, so on and so forth. In year 2, applying that surveillance gives you the opportunity to get an idea of how many low, medium, high infestation trees you have and how many dead trees you have. In year 2 with surveillance, you have the opportunity to treat that known quantity of trees. So these green arrows are treatments, and that's bringing those low and medium infestation trees into the susceptible category 2 years later, with that 2 years of protection from the treatment. And really, it goes to show the importance of surveillance and the importance of treatment, not only as keeping healthy trees alive, but also kind of bringing these medium infestation trees back. Known quantities of trees is extremely important. It creates treatment scenarios that preserves the most possible benefits for the overall tree population. And again, I like to bring up the pavement condition index when we look at these treatments. So again, identifying areas where you have these low and medium infestation trees, and then taking the proper management action to ensure their health and longevity is pretty similar to how we manage traditional infrastructure, in this case, pavement. So some of the other main takeaways for surveillance and control of EAB infestations involves the priority of control activities, which you could kind of see from the model on the previous slide. But the suggestions that this paper generated were really kind of against the conventional wisdom at the time. So their first priority recommendation is to treat those second level or those medium infestation trees. So two things: not only are you making sure that those trees don't slip into higher damage and need to be removed, but you're also interrupting the life cycle. You know that these trees are infested. You know that that EAB is using these trees to reproduce, and by treating them, you're keeping the tree alive, and you're also knocking down that pest pressure in a given area. Your second priority activity is to treat the low-level infestation trees. Again, keeping these trees healthy. They may or may not be infested. So again, you're killing any emerald ash borer that are actively feeding on the tree, but you're also increasing the likelihood that emerald ash borer adults that are flying around feeding and laying their eggs encounter a treated tree. Remaining funds should be used to remove those third level or highly infested trees, followed by the removal of dead trees. Again, the conventional wisdom was kind of as fast as you can removing these dead trees. But this paper really suggested removing those high level infested trees, again, as not only getting rid of a tree that's going to become, soon dead anyway, but trying to take that tree down and properly dispose of the wood in an attempt to interrupt the EAB life cycle. And then if the budget is not sufficient, the decision makers may need to let some highly infested trees die in favor of saving low and mid infested trees. Again, the idea being, if you have to pick between removing a highly infested tree or ensuring that other trees are going to live, you really want to side with treatment, simply because those budget dollars are put much further treating more trees than removing a highly infested tree. So in conclusion, studies continue to suggest that cooperative strategies of EAB management that include treatment yield higher returns at lower costs. Again, the idea that you can treat a tree for 20 years or more for the same cost as removal or replacement continues to be vetted out in different studies. Management plan goals should be aimed at aligning all ash tree owners in a unified strategy. Again, the idea that more treatment gives more time to more people. So really trying to get public-private partnerships focused on really all kind of going the same direction is key. Efforts should prioritize medium and low infested tree treatments. Again, from the slide previous, you want to focus on making sure those trees don't decline to the point where they're no longer treatable. And not only are you preserving those trees, you're lowering the pest population in that area. And SLAM is possible at all geographic levels. It's a scalable model, anywhere from a neighborhood up to a multi-state approach, is possible and is vetted out with the models. However, for kind of real world implementation, our experience would suggest that that municipal scale programs are the most successful and the most influential on private tree owners. And that's what I've got. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that, Ryan. I'll go ahead and share my screen then. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to go ahead and post those in the chat. I'll say for myself, I think the work around treating kind of those trees in those medium category compared to those, the best trees in an order of preference is something that absolutely makes sense intuitively, but is a really great thing to abide by from a management perspective. It's one of those like small things that I think can have like a really big impact for an area, especially if some of those limited budgets. One of the things that I was wondering about is, have you ever had any kind of experience working more in kind of that regional effort? We're having kind of like multiple cities come together on one sort of plan. And where I kind of bring this up is in some areas where emerald ash borer is kind of newly infested, and you have, let's say you have a neighboring city next door, in theory, and this is one of those things where people and sometimes kind of like, municipalities, government entities can be at ends, is it could be to that neighboring city's advantage to help provide funding to treat trees within that other city that got the infestation, because it helps slow down the spread into their city itself. But trying to get funds cross cities can be kind of difficult. Have you had any experience doing that in the past?
I haven't had any experience with that scenario directly. Again, your point is basically straight from the bioeconomic analysis article. The idea that, cities would be much better off pooling resources in their own best interest to try and slow the spread into their cities. I don't have any clients that have kind of directly worked together. We've had cities that have implemented very similar plans at the same time, neighboring cities. But I currently don't work with any cities that kind of share funds between themselves or combine on projects. But again, kind of the slide that we talked about RFPs at, we do have cities that have used strikingly similar RFPs to adopt their own plans and share borders, and some of them really learn from one another. But no, I haven't seen any kind of direct sharing of funds.
Sure, no, it makes sense. I think it's one of those things where it'd be great if that could happen, but from a practical sense, I think is a difficult thing to implement. Other question I had is, so if a city establishes kind of an RFP for a treatment program, do you see discrepancies between maybe kind of like how the city's going to manage the city trees compared to how, like, the within the parks area to other, kind of areas as well, mainly between kind of cities and parks? Do you see kind of differences in plans between those two?
So it depends. I mean, a lot of the different cities that we work with take very different approaches. Some cities prioritize their park trees just because it's high value land, it's high use, and others really prioritize kind of right of way trees or trees in the front of yards. Some cities don't really have a mind for parks at all, but there's not really a distinct theme, I would say. All the cities I work with kind of manage things differently, but those that do elect to treat in parks really try to treat as much as possible because those trees provide a lot more character to those kind of parks, and removing them really has a very noticeable difference overnight, versus keeping them around.
Sure. It looks like we have a question here. How do you assess risk of dead trees when making budget decisions?
Yeah, that's a great question. That has to be taken into account and really made a priority, depending on, the level of hazard. I know a lot of cities, will let trees in kind of natural areas or off trails and parks, sit a little bit longer than something that's, maybe hanging over a playground or hanging over a yard. But those are certainly high priority trees. Typically, cities already have existing tree ordinances that kind of supersede their EAB management plans when it comes to, hazard trees or trees that are a public nuisance. So that absolutely needs to be taken into account because typically those guidelines or those ordinances supersede the work that's being done with EAB.
Great. Cool, and I'm not seeing any other questions come up. So with that, thank you so much for your presentation, Ryan. Really appreciate it. And as always, for everyone on the session here today, if you have any questions that you want to reach out to the individual presenters, we should have their contact information available. If you can't find it, reach out to us. We'll be able to get that over to you. The next step that we're going to be doing today is we're going to have another break for about 10 minutes. And then we will come back and we will be doing our panel, which is going to be case studies, some unique city approaches to EAB management with a Q&A portion. And so we'll have individual presentations by a couple different foresters, and then we'll conclude that with kind of a Q&A session, and that will conclude our day. So if everyone can make sure to come back in 10 minutes, that's 1:10 p.m. Central Time. 11:10 a.m. Pacific time. So I will see you all in just a little bit. Thanks again, Ryan. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.